All right, aloha mai kako, konnichiwa, and welcome everyone. My name is Micah Fisher. I am a research fellow at the East-West Center. It's really great to reboot our in-person initiatives, but also to be able to accommodate folks who are joining online. We're really fortunate to have a really unique convening today. This webinar, I don't know, we need new terminology to combine those things now. Is part of our EWC Insights series that focuses on Asia-Pacific transitions. This is a region undergoing immense social, political, and environmental change. And at the East-West Center, we have compiled a wide-ranging set of presentations you can access at eastwestcenter.org. We aim to stay at the forefront of some of these emerging trends and always welcome new ideas that we can spotlight. Today, we're going to talk about sustainability from the perspective of local communities. This is part of our growing commitment at the East-West Center to center community perspectives on environmental challenges and reposition local communities as key stakeholders in devising future solutions. So when it comes to climate change, how are institutions and livelihoods impacted? When communities recover from a disaster, how can recovery processes be approached for greater resilience? Or when the growing interest in economic development initiatives like tourism emerges as an economic opportunity, how does it change the character of local communities? These challenges and their attendant dilemmas resonate with communities across the region, and today we have the opportunity to learn about the lives and livelihoods of Matsushima Bay. So it's a really unique opportunity to take us there, and we also have food from the area for those in attendance today, which we will have the opportunity to convene right outside after the event. We are extremely fortunate to welcome two speakers today. Ms. Miku Narisawa is originally from Miyagi, Japan. Her graduate work focused on peace and environmental studies from Meiji University in Tokyo, also a graduate of University of Hawaii. Her research and initiatives are rooted in her own experiences of disaster recovery from the Great East Japan tsunami. She is involved with various local development projects and community advocacy initiatives to promote aquaculture in her hometown, where communities are facing unique challenges of preserving local culture in the face of a changing climate. She also serves as an educational facilitator at the Lokahi Foundation, coordinating global youth programs, who is also a co-sponsor of this event. Our second speaker, or our introductory speaker, will be Mr. Yasumoto Nishidate. He is a senior managing director at In-Outbound Sendai Matsushima Inc., a destination management organization in Miyagi prefecture, Japan. He was born and raised in Aomori, an upper northern prefecture of Japan, where his family operates farming initiatives. His current work is to manage rural revitalization projects by promoting tourism in the Matsushima Bay area. He cherishes his community commitment to building solid relationships with community members and the public and private sectors to create a sustainable community for the next generation. I want to also thank our co-sponsor for the event. I mentioned the Lokahi Foundation, but also the Matsunaga Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, as well as In-Outbound Sendai Matsushima. Without further ado, I want to invite Mr. Yasumoto Nishidate to come up and give some opening remarks in Japanese, which will be promptly translated. And then Ms. Miku will take away the presentation for today.
Hi, 皆さんこんにちは。我々はですね、日本の北部、東北にあります9つの市町を、一つの観光地としてマネジメントしている団体でございます。主に観光地として、観光業だけではなく幅広い産業、一次産業などに経済効果を生み出して、人が 観光地、地域に関心を持ってもらってですね、で、移住につなげて、地域の発展を目指しております。はい、で今回、ご紹介する東松島市、浦戸諸島は6000年前から、人が住んでいたとされて、歴史が古いんですが、しかし、自然災害も多く、世界の皆様から多大なる支援をいただいた2011年の東日本大震災でも多くの被害がありました。この地域には、自然災害、海洋環境の変化による問題を乗り越えながら、この地で、生きていく、そういった覚悟を持った人々がいます。今回は、ぜひその問題を知っていただいて、この地に暮らし、この、土地を守っている人たちを知っていただいて、ぜひ、この地に関心を持っていただいて、ぜひこの地に来ていただいて、で我々と一緒にですね、地域の環境を考えて、世界の平和につながっていくことを願っております。今日はどうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
So I'll do the translation. So our organization manages 9 cities and towns in the northern part of Japan called Tohoku regions as a single tourist destinations. And our main focus is on tourism, not only the tourism industry, but also in agriculture and fisheries, with the aim of generating the wide range of economic benefit that will attract people to the region and lead them to migrate and develop the regions. And today we would like to introduce 2 regions that we are currently working on, Higashi Matsushima City and Urato Islands. So these areas are believed to have been inhabited since 6,000 years ago and have a long history. However, this city also experienced a many natural disaster and suffered much damage in the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011, for which we received enormous support from people around the world. And these people living in these regions overcoming the problem caused by natural disaster and changes in marine environments. This time we would like you to be aware and think of these problems and to know that there are people who still live in this area protecting their land. And we hope that people who are interested in this area will come to our town and think about the environments of the earth. And also we hope that our discussion will lead to the peace building within the community. Thank you. Micah, do you want to put up the... Okay, so my name is Miku Narisawa. I'm currently a graduate student at Meiji University, Tokyo. But I am originally from Miyagi prefecture, which is the northern part of Japan called Tohoku regions. As you can see on the map, the red pin is where I'm from. So we face to the Pacific Oceans, and as you can see on the map, so Matsushima Bay, as you know, the bay, there are around 400 different islands, but the people are not living there. But on the map, there are kind of bigger islands on the bottom, and that's where we are going to explore today, the Urato Islands. So in terms of geographical locations of Matsushima Bay area, so back in 2011, the tsunami happens. And when the tsunami happens, this Matsushima Bay area, compared to other regions, which is where I'm from, the east side of Matsushima, the effects of tsunami were kind of low just because those islands protected the wave. But where I'm from, which is a Higashi Matsushima, so we only have a flat rice field. So we didn't have any islands which protected the tsunami. So actually our area has been the most damaged area from the tsunami back in 2011. And as you can see in the picture, there's 2 rivers coming from the mountain, Narisawa River and Yoshida River. So in this area, the main industries are rice farming, oyster, and the seaweed. So these are the three top industries that people are living. And those fisheries are still believing that because we have two major rivers, that we get nutrients from the mountain flowing the river. So that is the reason that the Matsushima Bay is one of the best conditions for aquaculture in Japan. Okay, so maybe I can move on to the slide. Great. Okay, I want to ask everyone in this room, have you ever visited Tohoku or Miyagi or Matsushima? Yeah, Frankie. Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so as you, maybe you might know, but Tohoku is kind of not famous as a tourist destination just because people are traveling to Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, but Tohoku has a really abundant and rich nature. And, because the people still living there or the industry haven't been touched in this area, we still have a very beautiful nature, mountain, oceans, but in my area, because of tsunami and we get a lot of earthquake, tsunami, so then kind of damages our landscape as well. So today I want to focus on Matsushima Bay area, which I focused, and also aquaculture fishery in Higashi Matsushima City, where I from, and also rice farming in Urato Islands, which we just saw on the map. And then we'll have some time to do the Q&A time. Great, next slide. Please. Okay, so Mabe, great. I think. Okay, great. So as you can see on the map, where we located is where the two current ocean currents meet. So one is the Kuroshio, the cold current from Russia, and the Oyashio currents from the Okinawa side. So because we are located in where two different sea currents meet, we get kind of really unique ocean environments, which perfect condition for growing oyster and the seaweed. Okay, next slide, please. And before I wanted to jump on to our topic, I wanted to kind of explore where I got this point, how I got this point. So back in 2011, I was still a sixth grade at the elementary school. This is where I experienced the tsunami. So we have Air Force Self-Defense Station in Matsushima. So this picture was taken right after the tsunami. So I was still elementary schools, and luckily my family were all safe, but some of my friends and teacher couldn't survive from this tsunami. And it's been around 11 years since the tsunami happened, but I still clearly remember the day. It was March. In March, it doesn't usually snow, but it was snowing and really cold. So I lived in the temporary housing for 2 years after we built a new house in this area. And I think I spent 3 or 2 nights at the elementary school without having food or access to water, gas, those kind of things. And next slide, please. Okay, so this is where I'm from, Higashi Matsushima City, and the right picture is after the tsunami, and the left picture is before the tsunami. So as you can see in the picture, of course, the geographical or landscape has been changed because of the wave. So before the tsunami, we had a very beautiful rice field, which is green. But after the tsunami, everything was washed away. And because it contains a salt water, even still today, they can't grow in rice anymore. Some of the farmers tried, but they couldn't, because of the salt water. Yes, so that's kind of historical backgrounds of my city from the tsunami. And next slide, please. Okay, so I talked about what I experienced back in 2011. And then, so I was still elementary school and I graduated from elementary school right after, and I went to middle school. So then during the middle school, a lot of cities from around the world starting having a connection with my city and help our city from education perspective. And that's where I visited Hawaii for the first time. So back in I would say 12 or 13, a lot of companies and the people from Hawaii invited middle schoolers from Tohoku region where the children got affected from the tsunami, and just to, just let them experience the nature again and feel the nature again and just interact with other people. So then I was one of the cohort, which is called the Rainbow Japan Kids. So then that was the first time for me to visit Hawaii and meet really nice and wonderful people there, which I still connect still today. And after I came back from Hawaii, then I decided to push a little myself to do the study abroad. And I went to high school in France. And back in 2015, that was the ISIS attack happened in Paris. And that's where I was located. So then I started thinking about the meaning of peace within myself and why people are still fighting. What's the role of religions? And that kind of experience leads to, okay, maybe I want to study the peace and the conflict resolution. And because I had a lot of friends in Hawaii, then I decided to go to UH Manoa to pursue a bachelor's degree. A lot of people ask, okay, why did you leave Japan? You had such a great environments there. But back in 2011 or 2012, 13, because our city and the school has been affected, we didn't have a lot of textbook, not a lot of good education environments. So a lot of my friends are still suffering from anxiety, depressions. So I didn't, I thought that I might have to go to the different place to have a better education and also to just have a better atmosphere for myself. Then I went to UH Manoa in 2017 and I graduated from UH Manoa 2020 in the middle of the pandemic online. I couldn't go to graduate ceremony, stuff like that, but then I kind of forced me to go back to Japan, and this is where I got to the point where I'm working project with a local community. So before I really didn't go back to my community just because, I had a kind of bad trauma from living there because of tsunami and after the tsunami. But, during COVID, I went back to my parents' house. Then I started talking again with my childhood friends, local fisheries, and hearing their story about the climate change really clicked my mind. And, I think this is a time that I want to contribute to my community back. So because I was away from my community, I could see how my community has been reconstructed and also building a resiliency, even from outside, maybe the infrastructure, but also the inner side. A lot of fishermen were also damaged by this tsunami, but they never left their land because they feel responsibility to take care of their oceans and also lands, and even farmers. So I'm actually born to a rice farmers family. So my great-grandparents, my grandparents, and my parents are also rice farmers. So maybe that's how the relationship that I helped build since I was 2 or 3 with the rice field also helped me to or encouraged me to go back to my community and do a right thing for my community after the COVID time. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so today I wanted to introduce 2 regions. So one is my city, Higashi Matsushima City, and then the other one is the Urato Islands, which is the maybe 2 or 10 minutes away from my city. So it's really close. So we have a beautiful aquaculture in my city and also fisheries. So I wanted to introduce 2 major industry we have in Higashi Matsushima, and also how those fishery has been suffering or concern about the climate change or global warming that we are facing even in the global scale. And I wanted to highlight the community voice and what they have been working towards that issues. So one is the oyster and the seaweeds. The left side is the oyster farm. So how many of you had the oyster from Japan? Yes? Good, great. So it's kind of different from a Western oyster. So it's kind of really rich and it's really big. Yes, it's really big. And we can cultivate the oyster within 10 months of the ranch, which is kind of different from Western. But yes, so as you can see on the left side of the picture, it's really big. And from late October, November to it's usually the end of February or March. That's the oyster seasons. And the summer season is where they do the preparation for the next oyster season. However, right now, because of the warmer temperature is rising up, so oyster, they grow in the really cold temperature. But so right now, around maybe these last couple years, the oyster season has been from maybe November to just January. So then, they lost those kind of 2 months and they can't get those kind of income because oyster farmers are getting income just from their oyster, which is 5 months. But if it's 3 months, then it's gonna be half. But I wanted to highlight those kind of specific example of what they're suffering with. So then seaweed. So when you think about the seaweed, what do you think of? Like sushi or temaki, right? Okay. So this is where they this is how seaweed farmers cultivate seaweed. So we get from the oceans and it's all around maybe July. They put the seeds into the ocean around August or September, and then they started cultivating around December. So within 2 months, they grow really big. And those two oyster and the seaweeds, they need a really tough marine condition, which is a strong wind, like typhoons, cold weather, cold warm temperature. But because of the changes within the ocean, they're suffering very much. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the concerns that they had is the aging population and lack of use. So that's kind of generates the industry. And especially here in Matsushima Bay, we get the seed oyster naturally. So we don't produce seed oyster. So we can catch the seed oyster in the ocean from naturally. So that's how much we get really rich and abundant the marine environment. So I want to just point out the number of just seaweed fishery within the Miyagi, within Japan. So year of 2000, we had around 7,000 seaweed fisheries. However, back in 2 years ago, 2021, we only had 3,000. So within the range of maybe 20 years, the number of fisheries has been reduced almost more than half. Just because, the young people hasn't really interested in those kind of industry because we have really negative image of fishery. So fishery, it maybe depends on region, but generally the fisheries are only for men, not women. So there is kind of a gender issue related to the lack of next generation in this industry as well. And then also the distance between use and nature, and especially within my community. So after the tsunami, the government built a seawall, which is like almost 10 meters. So before the tsunami, even from our house, we could see oceans. But because they built a seawall, which is over 10 meters, we couldn't see anything, it's just a concrete wall. So then they feel really distant from the ocean. And that's one of the big issue in the coastal community, that distance between use and the nature, the oceans. Next slide, please. Okay. So then I wanted to highlight two more issues that those fishery has been suffering. One is the impact of global warming. If you can tap one more time, great. So this is our oysters from our city. What do you think is wrong from the picture? Anybody can guess? Like from this picture, oyster is something wrong, something wrong with oyster. Right? So, okay, so recently, maybe these last couple of 3 years, the oyster has been getting disease, which is, it's really difficult to pronounce, so we're just gonna call it oyster egg disease. So that oyster, within the oyster also has an egg. The oyster can't release the egg because, oyster needs the more colder temperature. But because it's warm, it's not ready to release it. So that is happening, but it's not, scientifically, it's not any problem to eat these oyster, but because it looks kind of different, it looks strange. The market doesn't buy it. And right now, as I heard from a local fisheries or local oyster farmers, so let's say they have hundreds of oyster ready to bring it to the market, but 90 of oyster are dead like this. So that's mean that compared to maybe 10 years ago, the income of the oyster are getting to like 10% from previous year because of these. They've got different disease too, but because of the water is changing, they only get like 10% of oyster of what they're supposed to get. So then water temperature rise, oyster cannot release the egg, and the future oyster farming are at risk. And also they can't sell a raw oyster because in Japan we have a culture that we eat raw oyster, not cooked one. So, but however, our project, instead of throwing all this disease oyster, we made an oyster soy sauce or dashi because it's not health-wise, it's not a problem. So we reused those oyster last year. And then also because those diseased oyster are sold at the market really lower place, that impacts the economy as well. Okay, next slide, please. And the other concern that we have, or the local fishery has, this discharge of treated water into the Pacific. So as many of you know, in the Pacific, so because of what happened in the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant stations, a lot of people says that only fishermen has been affected, those kind of from the aftermath of typical nuclear incident in Fukushima. However, when you think about differently, so the foods that we consume, or let's say any kind of seafood that we get from the Pacific, Pacific is only one water, right? So it's all connected. So it's gonna affect somehow. So it's not only like fisheries, but also like affect our future, affect our children. It's not only the fisheries issue. And also there's a rumor about the safety of seafoods. That is something that we still concerned, and we still requesting to the government and TEPCO that they need to keep measuring the radioactive numbers even after they started releasing the treated water into the Pacific, which is happening in just a couple months from now. And also the power relation between government and fishery communities. So when I work with fisheries, or our neighbors or all fisheries, we try to make a document to the government saying that, okay, if you happen to release the treated water, this is what we want you to do, like such as measurement of the radioactive or of the contaminated water. But we haven't get any response from them. We sent hundreds of documents to them, but we feel that we are not heard from the government. So even within the community, little tiny community, we feel there's a power dynamic between the government and also the positionality as a producer. So this is a really difficult topic for a lot of fisheries, just because ocean is something that where they build their life. So because they're receiving a seafood or fish from the ocean, this is what they're getting income from. So it's really difficult for them to build the positionality in this conflict. So they want to protect their oceans. They want to stop the discharge of the contaminated water. However, as a producer, they can't stop their economy. So there's kind of those kind of dilemma that they're fighting for. Okay, thank you. Okay, good. So lastly, I wanted to introduce one concept, Sato Umi. So Sato means a land and Umi is the sea. And one of the really nice seaweed farmer taught me about this concept. And also, so Satoumi is a coastal community, is where human interactions and abundance of nature coexist together and through the ecosystem and a cultural exchange. So one of the seaweed farmers taught me that, the forest and the ocean is interconnected. And if we want to have a good fish or even just a good food from the land, we need to take care of our land and forest, because the water or the nutrients coming from the mountain through river. So then we need to first take care of our land or forest first. So as you can see on the right side of the picture, so this is the concept of Sato Umi. So this concept has been grounded into a lot of Japanese tiny community in the mountain and also coastal community. So this is something that helps us to think about what is sustainability as well. Okay, thank you. So I kind of briefly introduced what our coastal community, especially fisheries, who are working in the aquaculture, has been suffering through a lot of social issues that we are facing. And so then I started thinking about why do fisheries want to continue their work with ocean? Although what happened with Fukushima, Daiichi nuclear disaster, and also what happened with the global warming, they're suffering a lot. But why they do want to continue the work with oceans? And then I think there's three reasons to it. And then one is a reciprocal relationship with the oceans. And I think it's kind of similar to what Aloha Island is. But if you take care of the land or if you take care of the oceans, land will take care of you. So there's kind of reciprocal relation that they have been building over the times. And also the genealogical connection with the oceans. And those fishermen, and including myself, we grew up with the ocean, and the ocean has been something that always with us, even before the tsunami. So we can't really separate us from the oceans. The ocean is something that we are getting from our food. And also, this is something that also ocean teaches about how to communicate with people. That's something that I'm always reminded when I work with those fisheries people. Okay, thank you. So the next one, the Urato Island. So next to Higashi Matsushima City, there is the Shiogama City, and within the Shiogama City, we have Urato Island. So Urato Island is located in the Matsushima Bay area. So these islands is composed of 4 different islands: Nonoshima, Katsurashima, Sabusawa, and Hojima. And right now, there's about 200 people living in these islands. And I would say about almost 80% of populations are above age of 75 years old. And there's only one elementary student living in this islands. And there in Nonoshima Islands, there are Urato Elementary Schools and the Urato Middle School. And interestingly, the people from mainland are commuting to these schools every day, every morning. So it's only 30 minutes by boat. So about 40 students are commuting from the mainlands every day to these islands. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the little map of Urato Islands. So each island has a really unique character. So one is the left side is a Katsurashima Island. So these islands has the most popular. A lot of people live in these islands, Katsurashima and Ichihama district. And I think there are 3 different oyster farmers in these islands. And Nonoshima is where the governmental office is from Shiogama City. And Sabusawa Islands is, they really focus on the agriculture, such as rice farming. So today I wanted to kind of touch the rice farming in these islands. So what is interesting about these islands and in terms of rice farming is that, as you can see in the picture, they don't have river or they don't have any irrigation system. So, when you grow rice, you need water. And how they get water is just from rain. So they've got really important traditional knowledge to manage those water and also sustain the rice farming. Next slide, please. Okay. Before I go to the rice farming, I wanted to introduce some of the concepts we have been focusing on in the Urato Islands. So Matsushima Bay Area, we get a lot of tourists in the mainlands, because Matsushima is one of the 3 famous destinations for tourism in Japan. However, in order to get to the islands, you have to take a boat about 20 minutes to 40 minutes. So we didn't get a lot of tourists before that. And because our company has been focusing on the tourism, and also we started this project because we want to help the islands. After the current generation passed away, there is no generation to take care of the islands. So in order to continue the islands, we need the people. So then we kind of put the new philosophical concept into our tourism, which is a philantourism. So philantourism is the mix of philanthropy and tourism. So the previous tourism, it's a usual tourism. So it was only one way. So you travel to the destinations, you buy a meal or souvenir. So it was just only one way. So the way that you understand the community is just a really famous tourist site. And after the tsunami, there's a term called volunteerism. So volunteerism is the form of travel that including volunteer activities aims to solve the local issues. However, what was lacking in this volunteerism is that, they helped the community, but it was only short term or one way, right? So for example, after the disaster, a lot of people came to our community to do the volunteer work. And then, we are so great for it. But after they're satisfied, they don't come back, So the only, what we needed was the number of people. So that was fine. But when we think about the islands, you have to make a circulation of the people and also the culture. So the philantourism is the form of tourism that creates a circle of support of the destination by creating an opportunity to visitors to participate activities. So what I mean activity is that the activity is something that really contributes to the community, such as we have activity to help the oyster farmers. The oyster farmers are getting old, so we need a hands to pull the oyster. Just little activity to put the oyster seeds in summer. So even just a little activity really helps those farmers. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So in the islands, Urato Islands, they have really unique characteristic, and it's just about 30 minutes by boat from the mainland, which is all the buildings are there. But if you take a boat, then you get really different scenic compared to the mainland. We get a beautiful sunset, sunrise, and you can also do kayaking because we are protected by the islands. We don't get a lot of waves, so it's really perfect condition, those kayaking, stand-up board, stuff like that. Next slide, please. And then just to introduce, we had some events that we invited local chef and we made a float into the bay, and we just had a one-day restaurant in the oceans. So then only food that we use is from the area, the Urato Islands. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Okay, so that was the picture from the one-day restaurant in the Matsushima area. And also, lastly, I wanted to highlight one of the challenges of that islanders are facing, which is also lack of people or lack of young generations. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share one story from a rice farmer's. His name is Togawa-san, Harunobu Togawa. So there is only 2 rice farmers in the islands, and before the tsunami, they had 10 or rice farmers. But because also this land got damaged by the salt water, a lot of farmers just gave up growing the rice. So this area used to be really beautiful rice field plantations, but right now they've got only 2. So it's kind of sad, but this is something that our project and we are trying to work on to revitalize the rice field again. So Togawa-san is, I think, 78 years old right now, and he does guest housing for travelers. He also do the diving and catch a fish for his guest with his wife. And then he also does rice farming, which is really interesting because he doesn't use a lot of big technological machines. So the way that he dry the rice is just we get the bamboo trees and you put the you kind of rug the rice after we harvest. And also in the May, we do rice farming, rice planting. And as you can see, it's really deep and it's right next to the ocean. So we get really muddy and maybe height of above maybe the knees. So it's really tough, but he's doing it by himself at the age of 78 years old. And since maybe 2 years ago, that's when we started helping him. And after their generations, we need the people to continue their farm, and that's one of the other reason. Is that next slide? So his rice can be utilized or turned into the Urakasumi Sabusawa. So Urakasumi is one of the famous local breweries, Japanese sake breweries in our city. So his rice, using his rice, this brewery are making own Sabusawa sake. And this sake is really famous right now in Australia, States, and other parts of Asia because of the Togawa-san's personality or characteristic, not just because it's because Urato Islands or it's because his passion and commitments to the land. Okay. So this is the last slide, and then I wanted to conclude, so the title of this talk was, how would you define the sustainability and how we can accomplish the sustainability? Why do we need a sustainability? Those kind of questions are something, always in my brain when I work with them or when I'm in the community. So for myself, the sustainability is, the relationship or resiliency from the natural disaster, particularly in our community. And also the inner connection with our nature, rice field, oceans. And I think sustainability is the one way of, sustainable ourselves as a humans, and also survival for the futures. How to save our food is something that sustainability has. And, especially rice is such a big portion of Japanese culture, even like Hawaiian culture. We don't want to lose our culture, and we want to pass our culture to the next generations. And maybe Japan is kind of behind for those kind of activities, but these are something that we are currently working on. And because I'm from that community, I also slowly growing our developing my responsibility to take care of our lands and oceans with those community, and also with my rice field, the family rice field as well. So I kind of briefly went through what our community has been through, but this is something that, I think these kind of opportunities really important to be aware of what has each little tiny community has been going through. And I think there's a lot of that we can learn from them. Thank you so much. And then I just wanted to let you know that if you can go to the next slide. And then next slide. So we have got a light lunch for you all. And these are the rice farmers, fisheries, and also we got the own local Japanese tea. So these are the people that produced our lunch for today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Miku. Sorry, I have to look at two different formats here, just getting used to the system. A really interesting presentation. We have about 13 minutes or so for questions. I want to hand it right over to questions. I see questions coming up in the chat already online, but I want to start with a question from the room from those in attendance. Any questions? Yes, please.
That was fascinating, Miku. Thank you. You're a very effective advocate for your community, the things you're talking about are really about, the interests of your community and the trade-offs that have to be made in terms of broader interests. Have you thought about going into politics? This is really you would be a good candidate. I'm serious. I mean, this is what you're doing, what politicians should do, ideally do.
Thank you for your questions. And yes, actually, a lot of people really try to put on me the election within the regional government. But I think I'm not that point yet, just because, I'm also working on the nuclearization issues with a university in Australia, New Zealand, and our fishery community right now. And what we are having through, this is something that at this point, the plan with the discharge of treated water too, this is something that we can't really handle it anymore. So I think we're at the point that, there's a lack of trust between our government and community. So if we can go, overcome that, maybe there's a possibility, but, yeah. And then also one of the things is that in our community, because we're so countryside, the graduate school or academia wasn't something that we were taught when we grew up. So me and other friends were the first generation who went to graduate school in our community. So that's how our community is small, and we're so distant from the cities like Sendai or Tokyo. But yes, politics is something that it's always interesting to me. But yeah, thank you so much.
All right, it's great to be on the conversation of politics, and ties really nicely with a question online. Which is from an anonymous attendee here is asking, there's so much that the farmers are doing. How do you see the government providing support to those farmers? What are the existing initiatives that government supports to local farmers, and how are they continuing to think through those issues?
So how the government has been supporting, or so for example, it's gonna bring us back to the issues with Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. But for, let's say, the Department of Fisheries in our regional government, they don't really provide support to the nuclear issues anymore. However, they do, so in our city, we get a lot of oysters, salmons, seaweed. So they kind of try to help their industries, but their main goal is to create more fishery people. So they invest a lot of funds from educating on new fisheries. But I feel like they need to care of about the, the current fishery they are working towards the future. But a lot of the local fisheries or farmers that I talk with, almost everyone feel that there's a lack of support from governments, and that's also something that I want to work on with, because a lot of them don't know how to work with governments, because as I said, it's really country and a small community, so the politics is different from city.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Talking about the global warming thing, but that's another story. I believe the issue is not, the major issue is not growing, not having the ability to grow. The issue is retaining the youth in the area.
Yes.
Where if the government can then take some of their resources and put it into promoting the youth going in. They give them big jobs in the city for just sitting in a box, with no windows. Why can't they take that same youth, or those people who are interested in Japan, interested in making Japan what it used to be, and start promoting the children to go to these areas? Because the younger the kids go there, they get involved. Some using their hands, and me, I use my hands in everything. I'm a chef. I build homes. I've always used my hands, and I don't even have a high school diploma. So it's not, to me, the problem there is not so much the climate change or whatever. The problem is retaining the youth who wants to do other things. They don't want to get their hands dirty. If the governments can create programs and pay the youth, not expect them to be there because daddy was there, I think that is something you might want to work.
Thank you, Frankie. I totally agree with you that, a lot of youth in our community has already left to Sendai City or Tokyo because they don't really interested those industry. But I think slowly, gradually, there's the shift that, a lot of young generations are trying to have interest with the nature back, like back old days. But yes, especially maybe like fishery departments, they have created a program where they can do like fishery schools. So I think they just started, or they just established those schools or programs. So I think, hopefully they will take those kind of directions to educate the young, or just educate why the nature is important, why our ocean is beautiful. Those kind of, direction is or perspective is something that we need. Yeah.
Why doesn't the government, if you had it, why couldn't the government put programs paying kids whatever the rate is over there, the box that they said in Tokyo and Osaka, and the same scale to bring them there? The government's wasting money on everything. You understand my point?
Yeah.
Why did, if you had a college, that would be where I would go.
Yes.
To influence the children, by the way, a $50,000 job, go to,
Yeah.
And kids go, hey, I don't have an education. What do I need to do for that? College, bachelor's, no, nothing. I need you. That would be a program today that I would start.
Yes, thank you for the comment. Wonderful comment.
So can I add to that comment just another point from Yuko Maruo here online about this concept of fill-in tourism, especially as how it relates to your experience in Hawaii and issues here locally about development of tourism, especially local and community-based tourism initiatives, as an economic initiative that builds upon local industries. How is tourism faring in terms of potential jobs of the future, or how are some of the dilemmas emerging about how it might be changing the character of the local community?
Relate to the tourism. Thank you, Micah. Okay, so as I introduced a little bit, so the inner side, the mainland of Matsushima Bay is really famous for tourist destination, Matsushima. And where we work is Higashi Matsushima and the Urato Islands. It's a little bit, maybe like 20 minutes by driving or 30 minutes by boat. I would say, the tourism is something that we need to work on. But maybe the dilemma is that, for example, the Urato Islands, the islanders are so welcome to have tourists. They're ready, but because we haven't really be able to promote our islands, like what islands makes, interesting, or what islands is famous for, we haven't really promote that yet. So, but in terms of dilemma, especially the islands, we don't have really conflict to that. But first off, as a lot of people says that we need to work on youth educations to just circulate the lifestyle of the islanders. But in terms of Higashi Matsushima, where I'm from, we have a lot of dilemma because after the disaster, the construction came to our town, and some of people said that Higashi Matsushima is a great destination for tourism, but before the tourism, we got tons of issues to work with, such as lack of use, natural disasters. So, our project, our company has been focusing on tourism, but I think before the tourism, we need to manage and create, those regions for the future. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we have time for one more question, Tammy.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very intriguing and very informative as well, and really wanted to applaud you for the work that you're doing together with the project and the people that you're working with, especially the communities. My question concerns sustainability, and for me, sustainability, like I grew up in a coastal community as well, and sustainability is about continuity, right?
Mhm.
And we talk about the lack of youth in these islands to ensure that the work in terms of rice farming and oyster and seaweed farming continues. I know that climate change is also one of the future risks that you have to navigate. And so my question is, how do you ensure continuity of these activities by providing the number of perhaps the right population to support these activities and bridge the youth gap to be able to go back to these islands to continue these farming activities while you navigate the impacts of climate change in the future? Because I understand that the impacts of climate change will also have a drastic change or shift in the fisheries industry in Japan. And are you and your project, or is the government of Japan planning or sort of like anticipating specific risks that will affect, this fisheries industries where you are?
Great. Thank you so much for your questions. I think the points that you just mentioned are something that we also have to remind every day. And one of the answer would be that, I feel like we need to, the education is something that we need to continue for sustainability. So, for example, just educate a student what a community is concerned, what the community people want for a future, or just, the characteristic of community. And also the other thing is that building a solid relationship with the community members. When we talk about sustainability in our coastal communities, of course the government is there, but the most important voice is from the community. What community wants to change, or what community don't want to change. So just listening to the community, having a solid communication or relationship with the community every day is something that we should continue, and we need to continue to create a the sustainability.
Hey, thank you so much. Thanks, Miku. Thanks, Mr. Nishidate. So I think this is a really great conversation about community perspectives, right? This EWC Insights series that we promote is all geared around talking about policy issues, community issues, environmental challenges, leadership issues, and things like that. And it was really wonderful having your presentation today and hearing about local perspectives around youth, around development, around tourism, things that resonate with a lot of people's research context in the room today and for those joining us online. I just want to announce 2 additional EWC Insights we have scheduled for February, featuring our current POSCO visiting fellows. So on Wednesday, February 8th, Dr. Dong-Jun Park will present on retribution or restraint, the role of reputation for resolve in South Korea's crisis decision-making. And on Wednesday, February 15th, we will host Dr. Brendan Howe, will present on non-traditional security cooperation for comprehensive peace building in East Asia. So a wide-ranging set of topics, scaling in and out, looking at different regions. And we look forward to welcome you all again to our EWC Asia Pacific in Transition series. Thanks so much for coming. For those in attendance, let's mingle, let's get together, talk about what the farmers and fisheries have been able to provide with us. Great to get the stories from where they come from. And hopefully this will foster ideas for some of the challenges that we face across the region on the environment and development. Thank you so much.